17 police officers were injured in the UK last night as hundreds of rioters attacked police and set fire to homes in Northern Ireland in what is a second straight night of violence.
It starts with a number that sounds small but feels insulting to many people. 50. That is the number being discussed. 50 people a week sent back to France under the reported deal. 50 while boats keep coming. 50 while thousands arrive over time. Now compare that number with what people are seeing on their screens. One migrant boat packed tight, rocking on the water. One boat carrying more people than would be sent back in a whole week. To many watching, it felt pointless. Like nothing was really being stopped, just delayed. That frustration had been building for years. Rising bills, rent climbing, food costing more every month, wages staying almost the same, GP appointments harder to get, housing lists getting longer, streets feeling rougher at night. People felt decisions were being made far away by people who never feel the cost. That night, 6 minutes before everything changed, the pressure finally broke at the heart of British power. Crowds began moving toward Westminster from all directions. This was not an organized protest. There were no leaders, no route, no stewards. It was raw and fast.
At 3:38 a.m., 28 male illegals were bussed into Crowborough Barracks. They're expected to be joined by more than 500 more at some point in the future. It's a leafy town in East Sussex. The locals have been protesting this in big numbers.
People spilled off pavements and into roads. Junctions filled. Traffic stopped completely. Whitehall locked up within minutes. Buses stopped mid-route. Drivers opened doors and told passengers to get off. Some cars were abandoned where they stood. Police rushed to form lines. Officers raised shields. Helmets went on. Vans blocked side streets. Radios crackled non-stop. From the start, there was contact. Shouting turned into pushing. People pressed forward. Officers pushed back. Hands hit shields. Bodies slammed into barriers. The pressure came from everywhere at once, not one single crowd, but many groups merging together. As numbers grew, tempers rose. Bottles were thrown, coins rattled off shields, flares were lit and waved above heads before being stamped out. Police lines tightened. Batons stayed low, but shields came forward. Officers shouted warnings that were hard to hear over the noise. Some in the crowd surged again and again, testing the line, forcing officers to step back inch by inch. At the gates of Parliament, the clash became intense. Metal barriers shook violently as people pushed forward. The sound echoed across the square. Police leaned back hard, boots scraping across stone. You could see officers losing footing, then regaining it, then losing it again. Some fell and were dragged back behind the line. Others were pulled forward briefly before colleagues yanked them free.
How are 55 or 60,000 people coming to this country illegally on a boat? How is that happening? That's insane. The year I came to Britain, 1996, 55,000 people came here legally. And now we have more people than that coming illegally every year. And we're an island. We literally have water around us. People have to get on a boat to come here. How is it happening?
Then came the moment that changed the night. The gates were breached. Not ripped open, not destroyed, but forced far enough to trigger emergency lockdown. The movement was sudden. The crowd surged. Police reacted instantly. Sirens wailed. Officers rushed people back. Inside Parliament, doors were sealed. Security tightened. Lawmakers and staff were moved quickly. Outside, clashes intensified. The breach spread fast on phones and live streams. More people arrived, the mood hardened, shoving turned aggressive, punches were thrown, officers were struck. Some protesters were pulled from the front and arrested forcefully. People shouted as arrests happened. Others rushed forward to replace them. Across central London, the city began to seize up. Westminster Bridge was restricted. The embankment was blocked. Tube stations closed without warning. Trains were held or diverted. Sirens echoed constantly as police vans repositioned again and again, trying to seal gaps that kept opening. Each time a road closed, pressure pushed somewhere else. Police brought in mounted units to push crowds back. Horses moved slowly into tight spaces, forcing people to step away. Some refused. Bottles hit the ground near hooves. Officers shouted again. The crowd scattered briefly, then regrouped. Arrest teams moved in fast, grabbing individuals from the front lines. Some went quietly, others struggled. Officers went to the ground more than once during scuffles. This was not driven by ideology, it was driven by resentment. People shouted about rent, about energy bills, about hotels taken over in their towns. They shouted about waiting years for housing. While others were placed overnight. They shouted at police, not because they hated them, but because police were the wall in front of them. Asylum hotels came up again and again in conversations and chants, not because of the people inside them as individuals, but because of what they represent. Guards at the doors, meals provided, bills paid. Meanwhile, locals queue for help, queue for appointments, queue for housing that never seems to come. That contrast burned. As darkness fell, the clashes continued. Parliament Square was locked down, roads closed, pedestrians pushed into narrow routes, helicopters hovered overhead, smoke drifted between statues. Flares lit the air briefly. Police lines bent but held. Arrests continued, vans filled and drove off, then came back again. This did not feel like chaos for fun. People weren't looting shops. They weren't running away. They were facing one place, one building, one symbol. Parliament. The crowd believed.
Used to work in a hotel, yeah? The whole place now is full of immigrants. They go out there, they get their free this, their free that. We can't even get jobs, half of us. And then they're working as well. I'm not racist, and I know it sounds, but I'm not. But it just winds me up that every nook or cranny, that's where they are.
They were being ignored, and now they were forcing themselves into view. Government statements came late and said little. Short lines about public order, no explanation, no acknowledgement of anger. That silence made things worse. When people feel ignored, silence feels like contempt. As the night went on, the pressure did not ease. If anything, it spread. While Parliament Square remained the main focus, smaller groups began forming in other parts of the country, not as large, not as intense, but driven by the same feeling. Town centers slowed. Roads were blocked for short periods. Police were stretched again, trying to respond in multiple places at once. It was clear this was not just a London issue. What happened in Westminster had tapped into something wider. Back in central London, police held the line through effort, not force. Officers rotated in and out as exhaustion showed on their faces. Water was passed back behind the shields. Helmets stayed on. Radios never went quiet. This was not about winning anything. It was about stopping things from falling apart. Commanders knew they were operating close to their limits. There was very little spare capacity left. By late evening, central London was effectively frozen. Commuters were stranded. Businesses closed early. Families stayed glued to their phones, checking routes home, checking messages from friends and relatives. The city felt smaller and tighter than usual. Not loud, but tense. A city doesn't need fires or broken windows to feel unstable. It only needs uncertainty. This is what loss of trust looks like in real time. Not slogans, not speeches, movement, pressure, disruption. The people in the crowd were not asking for theories or explanations. They were asking simple questions. Why does life feel harder every year? Why do rules seem strict for some and flexible for others? Why does accountability always land somewhere else? Those questions don't need ideology. They come from lived experience. Police officers did their job under conditions few people would accept. They held lines. They made arrests where they had to. They showed restraint where possible. But policing cannot fix a political problem. Officers can hold space, but they cannot restore belief. That was clear to everyone watching. This night was not about left or right. It wasn't about party loyalty or culture wars. It was about a growing belief that the country is being managed without real regard for the people paying the price. When that belief sets in, the distance between the public and the state becomes physical. You could see it at the gates of Parliament. Metal bending under pressure, lines straining, authority tested, even briefly. The breach itself will be replayed again and again, not because of the damage, but because of what it represents. A moment where pressure overcame control, even if only for a short time. Moments like that stick in people's minds. They change how authority is viewed. The government now faces a clear choice: speak plainly and honestly, or retreat into vague statements that say nothing. Acknowledge the anger, or dismiss it and risk seeing it return bigger and harder to manage. Because this did not appear overnight. It built slowly. Through rising energy bills, through housing shortages, through crowded schools and GP surgeries, through the feeling that when things go wrong, no one is really responsible. As the night moved toward midnight, the strain across the capital was still obvious. Police lines held, but only just. Officers coming off the front looked drained. Boots scraped against stone as they walked. Shields showed dents and marks. Radios continued to buzz without pause. This was containment, not control. Road closures spread wider. Detours confused drivers. Night buses were canceled or rerouted without warning. Taxi ranks shut down. Ride-hailing apps surged in price, then stalled as cars couldn't reach passengers. People walked miles to get home. They passed closed shops, dark streets, and police vans parked at junctions. The city was quieter, but more uneasy than usual. Around Parliament Square, the crowd thinned slightly but never fully disappeared. Small groups stayed behind. They watched. They talked. They filmed. Vans idled nearby. Floodlights stayed on. No one trusted the night to end cleanly. There was a shared expectation that something else could still happen. Police commanders understood one hard truth. If another large surge came, there was little left to draw on. Units from outer boroughs had already been pulled in. Neighborhood patrols elsewhere were reduced. Response times in other parts of the city grew longer. That is the hidden cost of nights like this. When everything is concentrated in one place, the rest of the city is left exposed. Hospitals quietly prepared as well. Not for mass casualties, but for the usual injuries that come with large crowds. Falls, crushing, panic. Ambulances staged nearby with engines running. These preparations rarely make headlines, but they are part of how a city braces itself when uncertainty takes hold. What fueled the anger was not rumors or extreme voices. It was everyday experience. People feel watched when they work, taxed when they earn, fined when they make mistakes, but invisible when they ask for help. They see money and urgency appear when the system wants something done, while their own streets grow darker and services thinner. That contrast is seen, not imagined. It doesn't need explaining. Government messaging failed to meet the moment. Short statements used words like isolated and contained. Those words did not match what people could see with their own eyes. When official language breaks away from lived reality, people stop listening. That breakdown was visible that night. This was not a crowd chasing excitement or chaos. Teachers stood next to tradesmen, care workers next to delivery drivers, pensioners next to people who had never protested before. Many of them do not normally stand shoulder to shoulder in the street. They did that night because they felt pushed into a corner. Police understood that tension. It showed in how they held lines without rushing forward, how arrests were targeted rather than sweeping, how officers spoke directly to people when they could. But restraint has limits when numbers keep pressing and emotions stay high. The wider impact will last for days. Businesses counting losses, transport networks resetting schedules, officers taking delayed rest days, residents replaying footage and asking the same question: how did it get this far? Trust does not collapse in one night. It erodes slowly, then suddenly. This night was the sudden part. The breach at Parliament was not just metal bending. It was confidence cracking. Confidence that government understands the pressure people are under. Confidence that decisions are fair. Confidence that someone is in control. Crowds do not need leaders when confidence is gone. They move on instinct. The next move now belongs to those in power. They can acknowledge the depth of frustration or retreat into silence and hope the memory fades. But cities do not forget nights like this. Neither do police officers who held the line. Neither do commuters who walked home through cordons and flashing lights. Westminster will reopen, roads will clear, barriers will be reset. But the feeling that brought people there will not move so easily. When people believe the system works against them, not for them, they stop waiting to be heard. They turn up, they stand their ground, and they force attention. That is what this night was. Not the end of unrest, but a warning. A warning written in blocked roads, stretched police lines, and gates that bent under pressure. A warning that the distance between the public and power has become dangerously small. What happens next will decide whether this was a single eruption or the beginning of something much harder to contain.